is probably a strip mall, about a 10,000 square foot strip mall. And these are the kind of uses that typically go into a strip mall. A coffee and a donut shop that would generate $600,000 a year in sales and would generate $6,000 to the city. A real estate office that would generate no sales tax. A sandwich shop that would generate us about $2,750 a year in sales tax. A dry cleaners that wouldn't generate anything at all, and a tax preparation service that wouldn't generate anything at all. And if you go down Irving Park Road and you take a look at the strip malls that we've got, those are typically the kinds of businesses that you'll see. So if you take this scenario on a 10,000 square foot shopping center, strip mall, the city would derive about $8,700 a year from a deal like that. And Ross, if you could go back to another one. And you compare that to what we might generate from a convenience store and gas station, even with a sales tax sharing agreement, instead of $8,700 a year, we're looking at $70,000 to $75,000 a year from the general sales tax and another $125,000 plus in city-only sales tax earmarked for capital improvements. And that is, in my opinion, a pretty significant difference between what we might get, even if we swallowed hard and took this kind of a sales tax sharing agreement. If you can bump it up, Ross, a couple more. And that basically just outlines what we'd get with a strip commercial mall over the first 5 years. $45,000 over 5 years instead of $50,000 plus for a gas station convenience store. Now, I had some concerns with this whole thing. I had some concerns about the cap. I had concerns about the term of the deal. I had concerns about the threshold and thought for quite some time that this was an overly generous offer. And I started thinking about it, and from a bottom line perspective, even with a sales tax sharing agreement like this, the city comes out well ahead of where we might see ourselves with the alternative. And just to sort of put this in perspective, I have a business associate I worked with in the past who's the owner of a Chevrolet dealership in the village of Wheeling. And I called him up today and said, just out of curiosity, what does your dealership generate for the village of Wheeling? And he says, we do between $40 and $45 million a year in sales. We generate between $400,000 and $450,000 a year for the village of Wheeling in sales tax on a parcel that's about 6 acres. Well, if you've got a and I might say that auto dealerships are the kinds of sales tax generators that most city managers would give their left arm for because of the sales tax generation. And I started running the numbers and I thought, you know, if a car dealership on 6 acres can generate $400,000 and this particular project on only 1 acre can generate $125,000, that's a business that throws off a pretty good amount of revenue on a acre by acre basis. And perhaps, you know, it's not quite as bad a deal as it might look on the outset. So my recommendation to the city council is that you take this deal. You might have to hold your nose and swallow hard, but given the alternatives, I think that is a better alternative than what we might have as an alternative. That's my recommendation. I think the alternatives to the city council tonight are to say no, thank you very much, and we'll see what happens. Send the staff back to the bargaining table and see if we can't get a better deal or accept it. And I've been in negotiations with these folks for the better part of the last month, Do I think this is their bottom line best offer? Yes, I do. Am I sure of that? No, I'm not. This is sort of like buying a car and you pay $30,000 and you walk away and said, you know, I could have gotten that thing for $28,500 if I just dickered a little bit more. Am I sure that that's the best deal we can get on the table? I'm not completely sure of that, but I think it's doggone close if it's not there. And that's why my recommendation is to go ahead and take that. Representatives of Gullo International are here tonight. Representatives of Thornton are here tonight to answer any questions, and I'll answer any questions that you have.
Let me get a motion on the floor, and then we'll open up for discussion. Is there a motion to approve the sales tax sharing agreement as outlined by the manager?
I'll make the motion. I'll
Made
second
by
the
Alderman
motion.
Cole, seconded by Alderman Lewiton. On the question? Alderman Wesley?
On a deal like this, is this project gonna be built within the next year? How long is this deal on the table for?
It's my understanding from Thornton that they would like to break ground before the end of this construction season and probably get this up and running in spring of next year.
'Cause I just don't wanna put a deal out there and 2 or 3 years down the way, say, okay, we're ready. With these times, I'd like to get as much money in as possible.
Well, I think that the next, if the council approves this in concept tonight, the next step is for the attorneys to get together and to put together an actual sales tax sharing agreement that will put all of those conditions in there and dot the I and cross the Ts so that, you know, everybody's protected. And, you know, we can put in there some caveats that they need to commence construction in a certain amount of time. We certainly put in the caveat that the city-owned sales tax is not a portion of this agreement. And anything else that the city attorney thinks we need to put in there to protect our interest.
Do I need to put that in with,
I don't think so. I think
Okay.
Mr. Bond and I have done this
All right.
enough. That-
just have to ask.
Alderman, please.
You know, I've been looking at the numbers, and I'm a numbers guy. I just feel the split, the city's share, I don't know, I feel like we're becoming a silent partner in this development. I don't, and Wally, you made a comment, you know, we're doing this so we can make it more of an appropriate deal for the developer. All of it, is that the responsibility of the council, make appropriate deals so they can make more money? I don't know, maybe you didn't word it right, but that's the way it sounded to me.
I think it's it's my responsibility to try to maximize the value of any deal, to maximize the revenue stream that comes into the city. And in a lot of these cases, we end up being not so silent partners. In my past job in Wheeling, I was involved in a Westin Hotel project where the city was on the hook for $23 million in TIF bonds to make the deal go. It was a $120 million project, and they needed $23 million from the city. And we ran the numbers and found out that we could recoup that investment in 7 years through a combination of property sales, hotel, motel, and food and beverage tax. And the council swallowed hard because 23 million is a big chunk of change, but it was necessary for us to get involved to make that deal work. I believe that it's necessary for the city to get involved in this particular case to make it work.
Alderman, please.
I don't have a problem, you know, giving some type of break or whatnot. $1.2 million, I don't know, what was this, 2-acre lot?
1+.
So under 2 acres, to me just seems, you know, I would have preferred like a 70-30 split on that first 1%. This is more like a 55-45 type deal. I don't know. That's all I gotta say.
Alderman Lewiton.
I'd like to say that I'm in favor of it, and I'd like to say that I looked at this from another angle. And here's the angle I looked at, and I share this with you. This is not, to me, a precedent in returning money to them as so much for a revenue sharing as a reimbursement for their cleanup expenses. Gullo, in developing the land, had costs exceeding $1 million in environmental containment cleanup. What Gallo has allocated, the $1.25 million, is basically the cost of the unfunded mandate to clean up the property of its contaminants and to recoup his lost income on that money. And this is not a precedent because we did the same thing with Mahir Lumber, because they had to put in over about $200,000 through an unfunded mandate for fire safety code upgrades. I know that not only was this one given to them with, well, let's put it this way, they had to go through court to get a decision made, but we agreed to it. We agreed to help them recover the money they spent from an unfunded mandate. When you look at the million that they spend, and I would ask them if they can give me an exact figure or closer figure, over $1 million, under $1 million, for the cleanup, does this sound so far-fetched to let them keep a tax base that they're creating in order to cover their expenses? To give you an example, the federal government makes unfunded mandates on the state and the city. The state makes unfunded mandates on the county. The county makes unfunded mandates on the city. If we could get back some of the money that we had to spend through some revenue sharing with the state, the county, the federal government, we'd be happy, and we'd never say, oh, we don't think you're giving us too much. And that's where I stand, and I've spoken, and I don't think that any response is necessary.
Alderman Shockey?
I spoke to Alderman Eugene Wesley today, and he asked me to ask two questions, if I may. Number one, do we have a clear sight letter from the EPA?
Mr. Clays? Please.
Again, my name is Rick Clays. I'm the managing partner of Bluestone Petroleum Partners. I'm the exclusive developer for Thornton's Inc. in the Chicago area. I'm a former 15-year employee for them, including the former president and CEO of the company. In response to the specific question, the environmental status of the property today is that we believe no further remediation is required. We are awaiting a determination from the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency. They will grant that no further action required once the property is developed and a barrier is placed on the contaminants that are left in the property, which is essentially our asphalt parking lot. What typically happens in these situations, and it's very common for gas stations of the age that the old Phillips 66 station was, is that the Illinois EPA has a remediation standard that it gets cleaned up to so many parts per million. Once you get below that number, they will require you or they won't require you to remediate any further, provided you can contain that on site. And what naturally happens over a period of the next 20 or 30 years is that petroleum contamination dissipates and the property's in compliance. So where we are currently is the state won't do anything else in terms of the environmental clearance until that property is developed either by us or by the Gullos, and improvements are made so that contamination doesn't migrate to other properties or get dissipated into the atmosphere. So I hope that answers your question.
So the answer he's looking for, a yes, is a no.
Well, we will get a no further action letter from the Illinois EPA once the property is developed and our asphalt parking lot is in place. Then the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency will then issue a no further action letter because their concern about dissipation of the contamination is in place. And I heard somebody say, is that a guarantee? No, because it's the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency. What's going to happen, particularly if we develop the property, I've personally developed over 110 gas stations in my 25-year career. And what's going to happen is, you got a 1 acre site there that's left. We're going to put underground storage tanks in a 14-foot deep pit that measures, 80 feet by 40 feet. If there's anything left there, it's going to come out of that tank pit. And it's going to be our cost to, take that away in an appropriate way that's permitted by the city. So, if the concern is strictly environmental, you're far better off allowing me to develop a gas station where between my excavation for the underground storage tanks and my excavation for all the lines running from those tanks to all the dispensers is going to require us to remove an awful lot of soil. And if there's any contamination left in there, we're going to have to haul that away at our expense, as opposed to a strip center that might be built on a slab with very little, underground disturbance or excavation. But, frankly, we would like, it's not our problem. Thornton's didn't create the environmental issue there. We don't want to bear the burden. So we diligently tried to get the state to issue this no further action letter before we went in there. They won't do that until the property's developed and, it's paved in an appropriate way.
Alderman Shockey, you may recall a similar situation exists over at Christie's Restaurant, which is an encapsulated environmental site as well with the blacktop. You had a second question?
Yes, well, I wanted to say that Alderman Wesley said that he wouldn't take part in the discussion unless there was that clear site letter. That's his statement. Also, he asked that if we had a letter from Harris agreeing to the property, because evidently it's going into the Harris property a little bit.
The status of what's going on with Harris, and I think we've given documentation to Ross Clicker, is as part of the original development plan for Bristol Park and ultimately the Harris development, they put into place contemplated cross-access agreements and easements, actually, that are of record for a contemplated development of actually this 10,000 square foot strip center that Wally just talked about. And that was based on a contemplated development. When we went in and laid our site plan over the contemplated site, we had to make relatively minor adjustments into those access easements while maintaining appropriate access to both Wooddale Road and Devon Avenue for the bank. So we proposed these minor modifications. We proposed those to the bank. We had our civil engineer and surveyor prepare a replatting of the easements and a vacation of the existing easements. Harris has signed off on those easements. Gullo is prepared to sign off on those easements pending our approval before the board. So there are going to be no other approvals required from Harris in the event we're fortunate enough to be approved.
Thank you.
Anything further? Alderman, please.
Just going back to what Alderman Lewitton was talking about, made a couple of statements. Says the city should help recap the losses. All of a sudden, we're going to help recap losses to developers, and then something about we agreed to help them. Who agreed to help what? I didn't agree to anything. I don't know, somebody made agreements? I'm not sure, I swear.
Alderman Lewitton?
I don't believe I said anything about we had an agreement. There's no such thing said. I don't think anybody heard that. We can listen to it. What I said was there's an agreement with Maher to help them recap the 200,000. That's a past tense about a past project that's from, 10 years ago or longer? I'm not sure how old it was. Anybody know exactly when that was?
Early 2000s.
Early 2000s. What we're simply saying is that, well, there's laws in this country that you have to clean up property that has environmental problems on it. And we have laws that say you have to have fire extinguishers, sprinklers. If you have combustible lumber on your property, it's got to be protected against a raging fire. So we have these mandates, and there's no government funds them. The city doesn't fund them, the county doesn't fund them, the state doesn't fund them, nobody funds them. They just say, well, you do it. We made a law that you have to do it. You have to put in sprinklers. You have to clean up the underground. Well, some places are revenue creating for the city because they sell things and they have sales tax. And I don't think it's unusual that the cities allow them from future earnings to recap the cost of complying with an unfunded mandate, whether it's the city's mandate, the state's mandate, they were still mandated. And I just say, as a government body, we'd feel the same way if we had the power to do it with the federal government, with the state government, with any government body that passes a law that, you know, mandates exactly what we have to do. And, you know, now for the first time ever, the state of Illinois has actually brought before the Senate and the House repeal of sales tax laws. It was just narrowly defeated because they wanted to repeal the sales tax in Cook County that Stroger put in. And he went down to Springfield and he fought that, and the Democrats won. They were able to keep their sales tax and the government out of taking away sales tax. But no one's to say that in the future the government won't come in here and say, oh, Wooddale, you can't have that sales tax for capital improvement because it's forcing people to pay too much in sales tax. And the precedent has been set to bring it before the Senate and the government. So while we have the opportunity and while we can do it, I think it's fair and honest to help establishments recoup the expenses they did to prepare land or protect their property from a fire. And I didn't say that we had any future agreement. I want to emphasize that. Otherwise, people will get the wrong impression.
Alderman Coles.
I just have two questions. I just have two things to say. One thing is, a few years ago, we had people that said, we have to improve our revenue into the city of Wooddale. This is improving our revenue in the city of Wooddale. Second, there's towns that are around that have TIF areas, which we don't have, and will give people who go in for big businesses a tax break for 20 years or 23 years, which is done. And I believe that we should allow something like this in Wooddale, because there's a lot of factories that move places that are move from one town to another town because the next town gives a better tax credit to them than the town that they're coming from. So let's either vote on it or turn it down.
Anything further? From my perspective, I think this is a good deal that we should vote in favor of. I like to keep things pretty simple. For every $5 in new sales tax money, the developer gets $1.25 and we get $3.75. That's basically a good deal. I also like that this is on the border with Cook County. Primarily, it's going to be residents from Elk Grove coming over and shopping and spending their money in Wooddale. I also kind of, with all due respect to Craig Johnson, I kind of like that idea that they're going to be coming over here because it's a little cheaper, and we're going to capture some of that money. The net result after 20 years, this is $3,750,000 in new revenue to the city of Wooddale. In these declining times when we don't have any building permit fees come in, when our sales tax is flat, when we're struggling to make a buck, this is the only development in the last several years we've had that's coming in and bringing new money to the city of Wooddale, which is something we have to be very aggressive about and to reach out and capture whenever we can. Roll call.
Alderman Lewitton.
4.
Alderman Police. Alderman Winger.
Yes.
Alderman Coles. Alderman R. Wesley.
Yes.
Alderman Shockey.
That passes? Welcome
Thank you
to
very
Wooddale.
much.
That brings us to item 1 from the omnibus agenda, approval of case number 09V3 Wooddale Bowl. Is there a motion to approve the variation?
I make a motion to approve it.
Is there a second?
Second.
On the question? We're on the Wooddale Bowl now.
Your, what did you say there? I'd like to read.
It's a motion to approve the front yard variation for Wooddale Bowl, 155 West Irving.
With the variations that Alderman Cadala had put in there? With those,
Is that your motion, Alderman Coles, with all the
Yeah,
recommendations that
with all
came
the
out of committee?
recommendations, 2-foot frontage, right, Mike? 2 foot?
Well, let me actually go to Mr. Clicker, then Mr. Malone, if you could
All right.
clarify what the motion is for us.
The motion was for a 5-foot variation to allow a 7-foot sidewalk in front of the business with the conditions that final plans, when submitted to the building department, shall include the kitchen. The wall around the patio shall be built to IDOT standards, and that the facade shall be of a consistent color and design across the entire front facade.
Is that your motion, Alderman
That's
Coles?
my
Is that your
motion.
second, Alderman Lewitton?
Yes, especially the kitchen.
Anything further?
The kitchen.
Roll call.
Alderman Lewitton.
Yes.
Alderman Police.
Yes.
Alderman Winger.
Yes.
Alderman Coles.
Yes.
Alderman R. Wesley.
Abstain.
Alderman Shockey.
I recluse myself.
That passes. Congratulations. And that brings us to item 3 from the omnibus agenda, approval of lease agreement with Christie's for coffee vending service at the Metro train station. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second? On the question? Alderman Lewitton.
I simply wanted approved with the condition that our insurance requirements are met. And the deficiencies that I saw on the certificate were the aggregate liability was not double the general liability, the occurrence liability. There was no evidence that the workers' comp was high enough to meet the underlying limits requirement of the umbrella policy. He had 100, 100, 500, and from my experience, most umbrellas require 500, 500, 500, a million, million, a million. I asked him either to bring us proof that his umbrella would bend down to 100,000, or to raise up his workers' comp to a limit that is equal to the requirement of his own umbrella. And the third thing is that in the narrative portion of the certificate, it showed and specifically state that his insurance is extended to a second location. And I talked this over with John Forrest, and he said it must show the exact address, 199 East Division Street, Wooddale, Illinois. And then the fourth thing is very, very minor, but it should always be kept in mind. The boxes on the certificate were not checked in the appropriate places, and I think that should just be done by the insurance agent to make sure that the form is correctly filled out. So those are the four things. If that's put in, then I vote for passage.
To try to simplify, motion to approve providing compliance with our outstanding insurance rules and regulations?
Yes, and somehow I want to put in there that the city, with this letter from the attorney for Metra, specifically has stated that the certificate sample they sent us was not intended for this type of operation. I don't know how you put that in there, but
I think Mr. Bond can take care of the details on that.
very good.
Does the movement agree with that, the way I rephrased it? Motion to approve, providing it complies with all insurance rules and regulations?
I would second. Yes.
Does the movement and seconder agree?
Yes.
Who is the movement?
Dan Shockey. and
Alderman
and
Shockey.
Alderman-
Okay, Alderman Winger?
It's a question for Attorney Bond that what is customary in this situation? I know we have city council now interjecting on what we feel is appropriate or should be changed, the thresholds of, and who is it normally between? the insurance company and the tenant, or